So we are, I think you joined just now. We are just running a round of introductions to know about your background, where are you from, and to understand if you have any healthcare related knowledge.
Yeah, sure. So I am a dentist in India. I am practicing in Hyderabad right now. But recently, from few months, I got an interest to know what does in healthcare, but in a IT field, what people are doing, and
Mm-hmm.
it is like very intriguing. And when I talk to my software friends, there are a lot of
Mm-hmm.
terminology, and they'll talk about it. So that's where I got an interest. So I want to study the other side of the field,
Sure.
and yeah, I think that is only what it is drawing me that side of the knowledge here.
So you want to move to IT from, you're practicing right now, practicing clinician?
Yeah. I'm a full-fledged practitioner right now.
Okay.
But now I am
But you want
having
to
an
move to
interest.
IT.
I'll not say completely to IT. I want to be a bridge in between somewhere. But I'll keep on my practice running, not a problem. But yeah, I want to see or check my hand where I can land up. Yeah, for sure.
Understood. Understood. No worries. All right. And let's go to Rajeshwari.
Yeah. Hi, Dixon. This is
Hey.
Raji. I'm from New Jersey. Past 4 years, I've been working with HL7B2 and working as a support analyst right now. And our company started using FHIR, so I would like to learn more and have more knowledge on FHIR. Dixon, I hope you remember me. I did
I
HL7
do.
with you.
I do.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining, Rajeshwari.
Thank you.
All right. Next, let's go to Syed.
Hi, my name is Sayed Atif. I'm from Canada. I've got over 20 years of experience working on EMR Cerner. I've got the HL7V2 experience as well. And currently we are implementing FHIR, so I'm excited with that.
Do you have exposure working in FHIR or just the basic knowledge?
I have a bit of, yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Next, let's go to Uday.
Yeah, good afternoon, Dixon. Hope you
Hey.
remember me. This is Uday here from New Zealand.
Hey, Uday. Nice to hear after a long time.
Yes, yes. So basically, I'm still with the HL7,
Okay.
dealing with the mainly with Rhapsody. So just wanted to enhance my knowledge on FHIR.
Sure. Then let's go to, I think Vitalis is done. And then I think Neeta. Neeta, can you hear us now? All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for a quick introduction. So this is to understand what we have as a group so that I would know, I would keep in mind how to progress through the training. But thank you, everyone, for sharing your details with me. Let's go ahead and begin with today's session. We'll go ahead and start with basics of FHIR. So we'll see what is FHIR, where do we use it, and how the name FHIR has come into play, and what is the importance of the name that we have. And we'll also talk about history of FHIR. Before that, let's go through the curriculum on what we are going to cover as part of FHIR, and then we will jump into the actual course content. So let me bring that up. All right, okay, this is on the other screen. So what are we going to cover through FHIR training? So today will be the introduction session. We'll take a look at the basic stuff of FHIR. We'll see what is hospital workflow, what is the purpose of FHIR, what is the main need, why FHIR has been started. We'll also take a look at the patient resource structure. With that, we'll conclude today's session. But as we progress through the training, we'll be having details on what is a JSON format that we are using, what is element within JSON. We'll talk in detail how JSON message can be created or structured, so that we can in turn use that knowledge in creating patient resources or other resources that we are going to go through. Then we will talk about other resources. We'll take one individual resource and we'll get in depth to understand what are cardinalities, what are the various data types that we can have. We'll cover most common data types that we will come across, and then we'll talk about descriptions. We'll talk about ancestor resources within that one single resource, which is patient resource. And then we'll talk about constructing that particular resource so that we can have some hands-on how we create a patient resource. And then we will see how to go ahead and use HL7 FHIR schematron to validate the resource against that particular schematron. And then we will also talk about how we can search for resources. We'll create a patient resource by posting it to a public happy FHIR server. And then we will see how to search for our record that we have created. And then we'll also talk about the maturity levels of FHIR. And after that, we'll be covering everything about REST. So most of the people who know HL7v2 may be very new to web services or REST services. So we will take a look at what are REST services, how it is currently used in the industry, and what is client server architecture. We'll talk about uh, how REST APIs work so that we know and we can relate it back to FHIR. And then we'll talk about basic principles of REST, what is the URL structure that we have, and we'll see what is API. And then we will see how FHIR has used the REST API models and how we can perform all the CRUD operations. So as part of CRUD operations, we will also take a look at what is instance level, type level, and system level interactions. And we'll also talk about a little bit more on searches after learning about these 4 operations. Then we will jump into, so by this time, you will have a good idea on what is the resource structure in detail, and you will also have an idea about how to interact with a server which is supporting FHIR using the REST API architecture. After that, we will take a look at few of the resource structures. So I have lined out the resource structure that are used most commonly in the industries today. So we will take a look at the workflow associated with these resources and see how these are used in those certain workflows. Let's say we'll talk about appointment workflow, we'll talk about order management workflow, we'll talk about medication workflow. As part of these workflows, we'll be covering all of these resources, and we will see what kind of workflow it is, whether it is a request resource or whether this particular resource falls under requestee model or an event model. So we'll take a look at that as well while going through all of these resources. And then after that, we will talk about few special types of resources, which are nothing but bundled and contained resources. So we will see in detail what are these resources are used for. We will see how to construct a bundle, what is the importance of bundle, and how FHIR has created 2 more additional models called as conditional create and conditional update. Not models, but operations called as conditional create and conditional updates, or conditional deletes with the help of bundles. How you can do that? We'll practically create the bundle structure. First, understand the bundle structure. We'll also create it. We'll also post it to the happy FHIR and see how it behaves. So this part of bundle will take care of creating a record if it is there in the system, or updating a record if it is, creating a record if it is not there in the system, or update it if it is already there in the system. So how do we control that? And we'll talk about posting a batch versus posting a transaction using a bundle. And we'll also talk about contained resources. So what is the special need for contained resources? Where do we use it? What scenarios we use it is what we'll take a look at. And then we'll talk about advanced search mechanisms. So by the time we reach here, we'll be knowing how all the resources are interconnected with each other with the help of resource references and all. So we will see how to perform searches when we want to get data which includes multiple resources. Let's say I want to get patient data. Let's say I want to get all the conditions of a certain patient. let's say patient Dixon, and want to see all the conditions of patient Dixon, or I want to see conditions as well as allergies of patient, then how do I go ahead and take a look at it? How do I perform a search in that particular scenario? So we'll take a look at advanced searches, which will include all of these aspects of how do you sort your data, how do you get certain content only from the resource, how do you control how many resources you have to get back from the data from the FHIR repository. And we'll also talk about include and rev include, which are uh, operations to include certain data sets when we are retrieving the data from the FHIR repository. Then we'll talk about extensibility. Whatever FHIR comes with is a predefined structure, but in case if you want to add new elements, that's where extensibility comes into play. We'll see how to use extensions, and we'll also uh, use tools like Forge to create an extension and add that extension to our basic profile. And then we will jump into another new section category, which is one of the most famous use cases in the industry today, which is conversion of data from HL7v2 to FHIR. We will see, we'll do that. For that, we need a tool called any transforming tool. In our training, we'll be using Mirth integration engine. So I'll introduce to Mirth, go, give a brief detail on how Mirth works, and then we will see how to convert an HL7v2 message to FHIR resources and then post it to the Happy FHIR server and then get the data back. So we will see the entire transformation of V2 to FHIR for one message type, not for all the messages, just by picking a few data elements from HL7v2 ADT message, and then we'll convert that to FHIR patient resource, and then we'll post it to, integration engine takes care of posting it automatically. Then we will jump into the security aspect of FHIR, where we'll talk about what are the security models that we have, what FHIR recommends, what is the industry using today. So we'll see what are the basic security protocols that every system has to follow. We will understand about OAuth 2.0 in detail, what is the workflow associated with OAuth 2.0, because that's what is Smart on FHIR is completely dependent on or based on. So then we will jump into Smart on FHIR. I will explain the concepts about Smart on FHIR. We'll go through what are the various launch sequences that we have: patient launch, application launch, patient standalone launch and patient application launch, provider standalone launch, provider application launch, and we'll see what are the technical intricacies of how to use Smart on FHIR. We'll look at the workflows, where the request begins from, what is well-known smart configuration, what are the contents of well-known smart configuration, how do you invoke a authentication request. So we'll see the workflow of it. We will not get into the technical coding of how do you code this particular layer, because that will get in deeper into the programming language, not the actual concept. So we'll just take a look at the technical concept and workflows associated with Smart on FHIR. And then we will jump on to conformance and profiling. So conformance and profiling talks specifically about how do you create your own resources? How do you read an existing profile that is available to you? For example, whatever is present in FHIR specification is a base structure. Any country or an organization who is implementing FHIR will have their own structure defined, which are called as profiles. So we'll take a look at what is profiling, what are the concepts of profiling, what is capability statement, what are structure definitions, how do you read a structure definition, and then we'll talk about implementation guides, how implementation guides will be helpful for us to go ahead and read profiles, read structure definitions of certain profiles, and so on. Then we will talk about licensing in FHIR. Then we will move to terminology. So terminology is a part where we will talk about how FHIR looks at terminology. We will also talk about what is code system, what is value set, and we'll also see how terminology service can be built. It's just a concept that we are going to take a look at and its business use cases. And then in the last session, we'll talk about preparation for certification. How do you prepare for certification and all, and what topics you have to cover through, what is the weightage for each of the topics that you have, how many questions you will be asked, and so on. Okay, so this is the course content that we are going to cover through the entire training. Any questions from anyone? Someone had a question. I heard someone.
Yes, I have a quick question.
Yeah, Vitalis.
When it comes to certification, is it like a direct certification, like maybe after the training we can go in for the certification, or we have to go like maybe through like a company we're working for? Do the certification?
Yes, you have both the options. I mean, you can directly enroll with HL7 and apply for your exam. But Smile CDR, I think it is an essential. I mean, it has subscriptions with HL7, so it is an HL7 member. So you will definitely have discounts. You can reach out to your internal training team, and they will guide you how to get certified.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, I think you can contact Duane. Duane will be your training team manager.
Okay.
Are we having classes every day, or how many days are you
Yes.
planning to have the classes?
Yeah, I mean, it will be a 5-day training session every day at the very same time for 1 hour. So 45 minutes, we'll have the training, 15 minutes, we'll have the questionnaires. We'll go through various questions in case if you guys have anything.
How many days is the course for?
It will be around 40 sessions, which means around 6 to 7 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, Shalini, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, Swati ma'am told me that you have an institute in Hyderabad, I suppose, or your
I
yeah. I'm not very sure. Like she gave me some info about you, and I tried to call you even. So I didn't. I thought you're busy. You did not lift the call. So
Oh, is
like
it?
for the around me. So if I want to go for a proper certification, because I'm very new for all this, whatever you are telling right now, the terminologies are also very new to me.
Mm-hmm.
So can I do a course something which starts from a zero? Obviously, I'll attend this, so I will have some knowledge whatever is going around.
Mm-hmm.
But if there is some course, because see, I come from a typical background of a dentistry. So thoda sa, it's getting a little, I don't know what is this FHIR. I have to understand that, do my homeworks.
Uh-huh.
So
No,
if,
what
yeah,
we are going to cover through is from the basic perspective of non-technical background itself.
yeah,
Okay.
correct,
So
correct.
don't worry. You can attend two sessions and then you can see where it goes and then you can decide whether you want to. But whatever I start from is always from zero. So
Okay, okay.
you will be able to relate to it and you will be able to understand through the course slowly. Is what I feel. But if you feel otherwise, let me know. We will see what to do.
Sure, sure, sure. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
because I am
Yeah,
a BCom graduate, so I know how you feel. I am not from a technical background basically when I started, so don't
okay.
worry.
Because if there are classes, then I would like to attend them like in person if they are possible. I'm not very sure how it runs. So yeah.
No, not in person, unfortunately. So we don't have any institute. So Shrinivas owns the institute. It is online purely. There is no
Okay.
physical institute that we have.
Okay.
Swati, who I mean, can you tell the full name? Who suggested this?
She's in Canada. She works for this
Got it.
medical coding, and yeah,
Got it. Got it.
she also got it done from you only. She said,
Yes.
yeah.
She got certified as well, I think. Yeah.
Yes, 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 yes.
Correct.
So
Okay.
actually, I went to her, and
She
from there,
suggested.
yeah, yeah.
Got it. Got it. Sure. Sure. All right. So let's get into the session and see the basic stuff of FHIR. Yeah, Prashant, you have a question?
I just thought of asking, so do we get access to the recordings later, right? Obviously, if in case if we miss the class live.
Yes, correct. All the
Okay.
sessions are recorded and they will be available to you
Okay.
after the session.
Okay. Perfect. Thanks.
No problem. All right. So let's begin and take a look at the basic of FHIR. So we'll see what is FHIR, where do we use it, how we arrived at the name, and what is the full form of FHIR. We call it FHIR, but the acronym C is different. We'll see what is that, and we'll see a little bit on FHIR's history. So let's begin from hospital workflow because that's where all starts. Both HL7V2 and FHIR, everything begins at this spot where a patient comes to the hospital and gets himself registered. So patient will meet the receptionist and their receptionist would ask the patient whether they are here for the first time or whether they have been to the hospital earlier. If they are here for the first time, they will register the patient and they will save the patient details in a software called as PM application. So PM application is the software that is used by the front-end staff to register patients, create appointments for them, manage the billing for patients, and so on. Okay. And once the data is saved and the appointments are created, this appointment data and registration related data will go to the provider's software. Provider is nothing but the doctor. And at the doctor's desk, you will see that they will have a software called as EHR, which is electronic health record, used by doctors to store patients' clinical data. Okay, so everything that happens in the front end, meaning in the receptionist desk, in terms of patient registration and appointment scheduling, this data will pass on to the doctor's desk. So how it will pass on? It will use various data standards. We'll see that later down the line. But the data goes from one application to another application. That's what we want to know for now. Now, once the patient is at doctor's desk, he will go ahead and discuss with doctor about his problem. Doctor will try to diagnose the problem. This discussion that happens between patient and the doctor is called as an encounter. Okay, so this is an episode that happens between patient and doctor. And based on the symptoms of the patient, doctor might suggest few medicines if he's able to figure that problem out right there. But in most of the cases, doctors will place lab order. So that lab order for blood test, let's say, is sent from the EHR application to the lab application, and lab application will send the results back to the EHR application, and then doctor will review the results and then he will prescribe a certain medication. So in this entire workflow, once the services provided by the doctors are done, then charges associated with labs, doctors, and other procedures will all be sent back to the receptionist. Receptionist PM application will go ahead and create or generate a claim for that and send it to the insurance company if it is an insurance claim, or if the patient is about to pay it, patient will go ahead and pay the charges and then leave. Right? So this is the general workflow. If you look at this workflow, EHR, which is the electronic health record where the entire data is saved, it becomes a central repository to store the data from various applications. It may be PM application from the front-end staff software, or it may be a doctor's application where doctor is entering the data into EHR. It may be lab, which is sending the lab data back to the EHR, or it may be pharmacy related data which can be exchanged between pharmacy and EHR. Apparently, EHR becomes the central repository to store the entire information of demographics, appointments, diagnosis, procedures, discharge summaries, labs, medicines, everything. All the entities who are here, labs, receptionists, providers, they have access to the data. But unfortunately, patient who is supposed to go ahead and have access to this information doesn't have access to it. Okay, so I'm talking about a scenario back in 2010. So, uh, so there needs to be a solution so that patient from outside world can have access to this information. Now, all these entities who are there here are enclosed within the hospital infrastructure, meaning they are present within the hospital. So these individuals will have access to the information, or they can access the EHR because it is in the closed ecosystem of the hospital itself. But patient who is coming from outside, they don't have access to any of these systems or softwares or applications, right? So to solve this problem, people were thinking, how can we go ahead and make sure that patient can also have some sort of access to this data? For exchanging data internally between different applications, we have other data standards like HL7 or HL7 or X12 or other e-prescription formats. But how can we go ahead and have data exchange with the patient? That was a problem back then in 2010. And the existing standards that were there, either CCD or HL7V2, were not up to the mark, or not designed to go ahead and have data exchange outside of the hospital and make it available to the entities like patients who are outside of the hospital, right? That's where HL7 has come into play. Sorry, HL7 FHIR has come into play. So what FHIR does is, now we have the data. entire data is present in the EHR system or EHR repository. Now this data, on top of this data, you can add a FHIR layer. What this FHIR layer does is it will go ahead and exchange the data with the outside entities by extracting the data and converting that data into a certain format, which can be supported or which can be used by outside entities like mobile apps or desktop applications. Okay, so adding this FHIR layer on top of your existing EHR will enable that mechanism of exchange. So what this FHIR layer does, it will incorporate so many things. It will enable REST API exchange. It will define what is the data format that you have to use in order to go ahead and exchange the data from EHR application to the outside world. So it standardizes everything. FHIR as a standard, it standardizes exchange mechanism and the format of the data that has to be exchanged. And when you are adding it on top of EHR, now this EHR data is available to the outside world, and mobile applications can be developed, desktop applications can be developed, which can be used both by doctors as well as patients. Now, doctors can go ahead and have a mobile application through which they can manage their appointments, because that application is now interacting with the EHR system, and that is possible by enabling or adding FHIR layer to the EHR system. Okay, so this is called as FHIR facade layer. FHIR facade layer, you can assume this as a face of existing repository, because you are adding a new layer on top of your existing EHR database. Okay, so every software application that we use has the front end as well as back end, right? The back end is the database where you store the entire data, and this data is now being exchanged with the help of this FHIR layer to the outside world, and people outside EHR's ecosystem are now able to access the data because of this layer. And this is called as adding a FHIR facade layer. Now there is another model which is called as creating a FHIR repository altogether. In such cases, you will not have a FHIR layer added on top of an EHR database layer that we have seen previously. But in this FHIR repository server model, what you will have is the FHIR database created. It will be a blank database, and it will have on top of that the FHIR layer, the same FHIR layer that we have in case of EHR database. But the difference here is you will extract the data from EHR and import that into the FHIR database. Okay. In the earlier case, where we were talking about FHIR facade layer, here you are going to store the data in the relational database format, and JSON formats are generated on the fly with the help of this layer. But in case of FHIR repository, the entire data itself is stored in the form of the JSON format. Okay, why do we use it, or why do people or businesses decide to go ahead and use a new repository altogether instead of using an existing existing database and a FHIR layer? There could be many reasons. One, making the data available, giving direct access to the HR database is a little bit problematic for a few people. So they prefer to go ahead and have a different database altogether and bridge a gap between the EHR and this FHIR database, so that the direct access to EHR is not available to the people. That is first thing. Second thing, making the data available always. When you are exposing the data to the outside world through your FHIR layer, it needs to be available always. Maintenance of that availability is very critical, right? So in case if they have a cloud system where they can store the entire data and make it available, then that would be far more better than their server or system which is present on premise. So even for that reason, they may choose to go ahead and have a FHIR repository layer altogether, or FHIR repository model altogether. But it purely depends on the business use case, whether they want to go with adding a FHIR layer on top of existing EHR database, or create a new repository altogether and have the data dumped into this FHIR repository and make it available to the outside world. So it's a choice that will be taken by the hospitals and the businesses that they have. Okay, so these are the two models, but the base essence is same, making the data available to the outside world through this FHIR layer. That is the whole agenda, and that is why FHIR standard has been come into play. Okay, so we have a question from Preeti. Yeah, Preeti, go ahead.
So how is this repository maintained? Like, are these JSONs appended in tables, or how does it look like?
So there are two models again in how you store the data. So you can store it in a relational database, but there will be one column which will be storing your JSON objects. Okay. Or you can have a NoSQL database like MongoDB, where you actually store the JSON objects natively and then make them available to the outside world. So both of the scenarios are possible.
So basically, organizations, they just append data, like append patient records in that table, or is that how it's done?
Append in the sense adding new rows for new objects. That's how they do it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Mhm.
A quick question. Therefore implies that the outside world doesn't have direct access to the database. It has to like maybe pass through the FHIR to
Correct.
get the access to have access to like maybe retrieve data from the database.
Right. Correct.
The data that goes to the database, is it like periodically loaded to the database, or is something that is a direct transaction that when the changes are happening, they are like maybe synchronously updated
Right.
in the database. So how does that
So
work?
yeah, so if you are choosing to go with a FHIR repository server, then there will be continuous updates from the EHR system to the FHIR repository server, so that the data is in sync with each other in all the scenarios. But in case if you are planning to go ahead with adding a FHIR facade layer, then data is always real time, so there is no problem there. But if you choose with FHIR repo, then you would need to go ahead and make sure that data is in sync by sending the data back from EHR to FHIR repository frequently.
All right. Just like maybe trying to correlate that with how it works.
Yep.
Well,
Yep. Sure. Sure. No worries. All right. Any other questions before we move ahead? Okay. So what is FHIR? So FHIR stands for Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. So uh, healthcare, because we are dealing with healthcare data. Interoperability, because we are exchanging data. The term interoperability means when two apps can exchange data and talk to each other. That term, then we call it that those two applications are interoperable with each other because they are able to exchange the data and talk to each other. So as this is a healthcare standard, we have the term healthcare as this is used for interoperability, so that data can be exchanged between mobile apps and other apps with the EHR. It is called as interoperability. And resources is because the entire data within the EHR system is broken down into chunks of data sets. So we'll talk about those resources in a bit. That is the core of FHIR. That is the core of FHIR standard or FHIR architecture. So we'll come back to resources in a bit. But with the term fast, this is an uh, fast in the sense this is an, I would say, that's where we want to be with the help of FHIR standard. This is a goal that the standard want to have. So that is more relative than saying that it is fast today. So the whole idea of implementing FHIR or providing or creating a FHIR standard is to make implementations much more faster than what we have today with HL7 V2, CDA and all, right? So this is an aspiration, I would say. So being fast in terms of implementation is the aspiration uh, for the standard. So if you talk in detail about FHIR resources, so let's go and understand about resources, and let's understand why FHIR has been started. So as I said earlier, the current data standard was not solving the problem. Let's say we have V2, V3 CDA. They were confined and they were for specific use cases of implementations within the hospital ecosystem. And there was a need for new healthcare data standard that can exchange data with the outside world. So FHIR uses these web services and REST services technologies, and it uses the native standard of JSON, XML, RDF, and all, which are already being used for many other implementations apart from healthcare. Okay, because all the mobile apps, Android apps, everything that is getting used at that point of time in 2010, they were already using very good REST API architectures, and many people are able to develop mobile apps with the help of this REST API architecture. But within healthcare, we didn't have that. So that's when FHIR decided to go ahead and use these RESTful web services, and then make it fast to implement, because people will already be aware of these technologies, right? Because they are already implementing so many, there are so many use cases out there which are using REST API technologies. Okay, and then next we have detail about resources. So in FHIR, resources are called as the building blocks. Resources are nothing but they are called as the building blocks of FHIR because they form the entire structure of the FHIR standard. Entire hospital data set is divided into small data objects or data sets, and each data set is called as a resource. For example, we have many data elements within EHR, right? We have demographic data, we have appointment related data, uh, we have diagnosis related data, procedure related data, and so on. Each of these data sets, patient data is called as patient resource. One subset of this data, patient data is called as patient resource. Appointment data is called as appointment resource. And result information, lab result information of the patient is called as observation resource. So in this way, entire healthcare data is divided into small chunks of data sets. These data sets are called as resources. Okay, so what FHIR does is, how do you exchange these small data sets through the FHIR model is what is defined by FHIR standard. So you perform a REST API call, or you can say that a mobile app requesting for patient data from the EHR, a mobile app requesting for observation data of the patient from EHR. So you will just get certain small chunk of data set from the EHR repository, and each chunk is called as a resource. Okay, we'll take a deeper look at resource down the line. And now let us take a look at the evolution of data standards in HL7 world. So HL7 has started back in 1987. Initially, they have introduced 2.3. Later, they have introduced version 2.5. And then in 2005, they have released version 3 and CDA. So version 3 is not being used anywhere today. I'm not sure if someone is using few of the implementations, but you won't see much implementations with version 3. All the implementations will be around version 2 itself. And then you have FHIR, which has started in 2010. Development of FHIR has started in 2010, but a large amount of usage of FHIR has begun in 2019 after release of R4. Okay, so after R4 has been released, and especially with COVID, people started to use or have digital interactions with between patients and hospitals, and there are a lot of FHIR implementations that has kicked in after 2019. And today we see that a lot of implementations are being done, or at least being designed to go ahead and have or use FHIR for the data exchange around the world. And in 2023, FHIR R5 is also released, and but people are still with R4. New implementations, whoever are beginning, they are starting to use R5. So why do we need FHIR? So as I said earlier, interoperability current standards couldn't satisfy the requirements, and the data needs for exchanging the standards is increasing day by day. And then we needed real-time data exchange, and there is a vast amount of data that is present in EHR for a certain patient, and existing standards were lacking and new standards were required. So FHIR has been introduced, so because it was taking into consideration about the existing standard implementations by acquiring REST API as the model, or REST API as the design. Okay, FHIR also combines a lot of features from V2, V3, and CDA. Now, this is very interesting point. From when FHIR was being built as a data standard, there may be few mistakes that we have done in terms of building other standards like V2, V3, CDA, and there may be some good practices of V2, V3, CDA, right? So HL7, while building this, has acquired this and made sure that all the good practices are in place in FHIR. All the learnings that we had from V2, V3, CDA are also in place in FHIR. Okay. And FHIR can be exchanged, or basically it has 4 paradigms to begin with. Now there are new paradigms like data, bulk data loads and all. But when it started, it had 4 paradigms, which means 4 sections, where it can be implemented, or 4 categories, how it can be implemented. Number 1 is REST APIs. So data can be exchanged in the form of REST APIs, which is nothing but the request response mechanism. A mobile app can request for the data from EHR. EHR can respond back to the mobile app with the data that it requested for. Then you have documents architecture. So documents architecture is a model where the entire patient data is converted into one single document, and it can be made it available for anyone, and it can be exchanged through pen drives or some other web services if you want to, without using the REST API design and architecture of FHIR. The whole goal is to make that document available and can be exchanged in any form, any format, any communication model. It doesn't define about the communication model on how you want to exchange that certain document. Next, you have messaging. So messaging is all about replacing V2 and V3. So if there are any V3 implementations, and for already existing V2 implementations, FHIR has defined a category of resources and the model how you can replace your HL7 V2 messaging with FHIR messaging bundle or messaging paradigm. Okay, and this is still in development phase. As I said earlier, FHIR is still evolving. It will take a lot of time for FHIR to become a complete standard. Until then, HL7 V2 and FHIR will coexist for a very long time. Then we have finally services in place. So you can develop individual services using FHIR standard. So FHIR has definitions, or the services paradigm has definitions how you can develop your services. So any questions so far? All right, so I'm not hearing anything. So we will conclude today's session here. In tomorrow's session, we will take a look at what is a resource. We will see in detail why do we need a resource and what is the agenda behind using a resource and how it can be used. And we will deep dive into the concept of single resource and multiple resources. How does it make sense to go ahead and use multiple resources versus a single resource? Okay, and then slowly we will move into the resource structure to see what is the structure laid down by FHIR standard for one single resource, and then we'll proceed further slowly. Yeah, Preeti, go ahead.
So Dixon, there's one question. I'm jumping a little bit ahead here, but
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we are doing at the workplace right now, um, is there a page on the HL7 website that can tell, OBX, for example, OBX segments, they get converted into observation. So in that also, there can be some different conditions. So where can I find that information? Because at the workplace, we
Mm-hmm.
are we have SciMedical as a third-party application that is used for converting local codes into standardized codes for
Mm-hmm.
for example, Loink and SNOMED, stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
So we the vendor has the vendor has uh, the vendor has basically designed the JSON conversion, but we
Mm-hmm.
want to test it and we want to make sure that it is coming right.
Mm-hmm.
So on the on HL7, is there a reference page or section that I can go through and I can compare?
Compare what?
Uh,
You can
like for
validate
example,
the structure of the message.
the JSON meaning, right?
Right, correct.
Like
You can.
I have results,
Mm-hmm,
HL7 the results, and
mm-hmm,
I the software creates JSON.
mm-hmm.
So where can I have those rules that I can validate that they are doing the conversion correctly?
So you have, when they are converting the data, are they using standard R4 profile or did they create their own
Yes.
profile?
They said they are using standard R4 profile.
Okay, so you have FHIR validator
Mm-hmm.
available. You can use
Mm-hmm.
that validator and you can paste your resource there, and it will validate your object against the FHIR R4 profile and say whether something is wrong with that particular object or not, if that is
Oh.
from the profile perspective. But from
Mm-hmm.
data perspective, someone has to do it manually to see whether
Mm-hmm.
the data is showing up correctly or not, or
So,
whether, let's say, the code they are sending to us, whether they are
mm,
sending the correct code or not,
mm,
that has to be done manually. You can automate it, provided you know what codes are there. You will have to write your validation layer separately for data validations. So let's
mm,
say I have 100 codes and I want to validate whether the code that I am receiving is part of these 100 codes or not. So there are multiple ways on how you can achieve that. You can either create a code set and write a logic within your integration layer and say, is this code part of this code set? If it is not, then throw an error. If it is there, then don't throw an error. But you have to write some sort of custom logic for your data validation for sure.
okay, okay. But and is there a section on FHIR website that tells OBX and segments get converted into observation, stuff like that?
You have a HL7 V2 to FHIR translation or mapping section
Mm.
where it will tell about which segment converts into, I mean, which data element within a segment converts into what kind of resource.
Okay, okay. So I
Segment-wise
just had to,
mapping,
yeah,
field-wise mapping is also available there.
V2 to FHIR.
V2 to FHIR, yes.
Okay, let me, yeah. I'll try searching it.
Yeah. Or you can message me, I'll share that with you.
Thank you.
A quick question, maybe, is there like a documentation, like a book that like maybe a reference book that we can like maybe buy or going through as to move along the class?
For this, I mean, whatever I am presenting, I am anyways going to share it with you guys. And recording will be available. But the documentation wise, FHIR website itself has good amount of documentation. So you can go through that documentation or the presentations and documents that I will be sharing through the training. But uh, uh, nothing is available like a book where it will talk about whatever we are talking during the session.
All right.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone?
When we'll be doing V2 to FHIR conversion, is there Mirth tool available that like for free that can do this thing?
Yes, Mirth is free. Anyone can go ahead and install it. So during our training, we are going to install that. You guys will also be installing it and you will be practically uh, working to develop those transformations. So I'll teach you how to go ahead and do that.
So the normal Mirth can do that as well, because I have seen a version of Mirth where it gives you the conversions and all those things, where you define the iterations and you can.
Ah, yeah. You mean the plugins in the FHIR?
Yes.
Honestly, I'm not a fan of that. I worked on
Okay.
plugins as well. It's very, um, I would say, very difficult to work with a GUI of FHIR plugin. Uh, I'm going to show you a way how you can go ahead and build your structures using JavaScript and build it easily and fast. Uh, compared to GUI.
Okay.
I'm not sure about others' opinions on who has used GUI, but my opinion, my experience with it has been very not very good, because it is very difficult to implement. Any change you want to make, you have to go to the GUI. You have to see the mappings are right. Mappings will go away at times. If you have to change something, something else was broken. So it was difficult, tough journey.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions from anyone? Okay, so let's go ahead and conclude today's session here. We'll catch up tomorrow. We'll start taking a look at resources, and we'll take a deeper dive into resource structure. How is the resource structure designed by FHIR? And then we will jump into the level of understanding elements, JSON structure. How do we represent a resource in the form of a JSON structure, and so on. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining. You all have a good day. We'll catch up tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.